Yellow and Red makes by Digits 27, Chapter 58. Naruto hopped happily over the rooftops of Sunagakure, basking in the familiarity that permeated the air of his home. It didn't take him long to find Tatuya. There was only one place that she would go when in the mood for those delicious dumplings. Kushidango, a stand that she proclaimed to be the best purveyor of food in all of the elemental nations. A compliment the owner took in stride. He ducked under the flaps of the stall, nodding his hello to the old woman who ran the stall and her son. He sat down on one of the seats, quickly nicking a stick of dango off a Fu's plate, knowing that if he did the same to Tuya, then he would likely lose a finger. Fu just yelped in annoyance before trying to snatch the stick from Naruto's hand. He quickly swatted the hand away while holding the stick just out of her reach. Thus began a small battle between the two. Naruto blocking all of Fu's attempts with one hand while eating each dumpling from the stick, tentatively slow. Hey, come on, Oni-san. Hey, Oni-san, is there something different about your jacket? Naruto grinned. Fu wasn't a shinobi because she lacked observational skills after all. Tuya looked around, also noticing the change to Naruto, except she actually knew what it meant. Whoa, shithead, I knew you wanted to make Jonin, but I didn't think you would steal one of their jackets. Naruto just smirked, letting his coat hang open a bit more so the jacket was more visible, proudly displaying the symbol of his promotion. Nope, all mine. Tuya raised her eyebrow. Honestly, she had thought it was some kind of elaborate prank. For somebody's Naruto's age to make Jonin was pretty much unheard of outside of war times. Whoa, what's Gar thinking? They think he's gonna make you a Jonin? Naruto looked a little hurt, even if it was obvious Tuya said it merely in jest. What, you don't think I'm good enough to be a Jonin? Tuya looked at him in amusement. Naruto, I'm on your team. We've only done about 15 missions, not nearly enough to qualify for Jonin. Naruto smiled sheepishly as he rubbed the back of his head. I guess the experience will just come with the job. Anyways, I'm pretty sure killing an S-rank shinobi counts as an S-rank mission, so I've done like four of those. Tuya shrugged, finally letting a smile onto her face, a genuine one as she leaned over and hugged her boyfriend. Nice one, Naruto. I'm proud of you. Naruto smiled as well as he leaned into her shoulder, breathing in her hand as he returned the comforting hug. Suddenly, Tuya broke away from him, smirking devilishly. But don't think this makes you better than me. I'll still kick your ass up and down the training fields. Naruto returned the smirk, standing up so he was taller than her, looking down at the top of her red hair until she looked up. Oh, really? And she stood up, but she was still shorter than him by a few inches. Even so, she managed to strike an imposing figure as she poked him in the chest. Yeah, really? Naruto was about to comment when Fu sighed, looked between the both of them. Do we have to do this? Can we just celebrate Oni-san becoming a Jonin without having a massive spar that will probably destroy a training field? Both Naruto and Tuya looked at the younger girl oddly with amused smirks on their faces. That was generally how they celebrated most things. Suddenly Tuya gained a rather mischievous grin as she wormed her way behind Naruto, pulling him back as she looped her arms over his shoulders. Celebrate, huh? That's the way you think, Fu. And she quickly pulled Naruto into a deep kiss, which he didn't mind returning in the slightest. Fu just sighed again as she returned to her dango. Can't you guys think about anything other than fighting or making out? Tuya kept her innocent yet oh so devilish grin as she broke away from Naruto's lips. Oh, think about plenty of other things. Fu sighed again and nearly smacking her head into the counter in exasperation. I don't think I'll ever understand you guys. Naruto broke out of Tuyu's clutches for just a moment to wrap his arms around Fu's shoulder in much the same way Tuya had done to him, with less intimacy, of course. I don't know, soon you'll meet a guy and fall for him like Tuya did for me. He heard an indignant but playful huff behind him, but ignored it with a smile. Then after I scare him shitless for trying anything with you, then you can finally understand how we feel all the time. Fu just snorted but smiled at the thought all the same, picking at her dango. You wouldn't really fight anyone I like, would you? Naruto just smirked as she turned around, not answering. Would you? His smirk turned into a full-on grin as Fu looked at him critically with a hint of worry. Hey, I'm your big brother. It's my job. Fu scowled as Naruto laughed. Tuya quickly joined in as she draped herself over his body. How about that celebrating, shithead? Naruto just grinned as he quickly hoisted Tuya onto his back, much to her delight as she yelped in unexpected surprise. Sure thing, Taya-chan. Suddenly he remembered that they weren't alone and looked down at Fu in worry. Not wanting to abandon the girl, the mid-13 merely looked up and sighed with a small smile. Just go, Onisan. I'm sure I can find something to do. Taya looked over Naruto's shoulder teasingly. Oh, gonna go find Yukimaru and maybe get started on that whole understanding us thing. Fu scowled, but Taya just giggled madly before Naruto shot her an apologetic look and vanished from the stand. No doubt back to the shared room. Fu sighed, finished off the last stick of dango and paid for her meal, waving to the nice stall owner as she got up and left. She stood outside in the street wondering what to do. As she shrugged, Taya made a good point. She might as well go see Yukimaru and see how they were settling in too soon. Of course, that was the only reason she was going. There was no other reason. Nothing at all. Naruto appeared in the room, his lips already locked onto Yu's as they fell as a laughing heap onto the bed. Taya quickly took the initiative, straddling Naruto even as they shimmered further up the bed, accidentally knocking his head against the headboard. He winced and she looked down, but all she saw was a cheeky smile before she was slipped. Suddenly looking up at Naruto's face, outlined by a glowing halo as his head blocked the ceiling light. She blinked in surprise. Naruto's hair practically glowed with the black light, making her reach up and gently stroke it. If Naruto was shocked by the action, he didn't show it. Instead decided to get across his appreciation in the form of a long, deep, and loving kiss. They used chakra to create oxygen in their lungs, not having to part from one another's embrace for a good 5 minutes before they separated. Smiling insanely as a single strand of saliva connected them at the lips, they rolled around on the bed, going back and forth with kisses of varying intensity until it suddenly disappeared out from under them, and they both crashed to the floor. Once again, they gently chuckled to one another before Naruto got up, helping Taya up with a hand as he did so. They brushed themselves off before Taya practically tackled Naruto back onto the bed, straddling him once again. As she quickly began to tug at his coat, he could clearly see the gleam in her eye that told him what she wanted, and sat up so she could pull off the red coat that was between her and her prize. As she did so, Naruto pulled gently at the hem of her shirt until she let up for a moment to allow him to slide it over his head. He smiled warmly as her head re-emerged from the shirt, allowing her vibrant red hair to cascade down her shoulders like a shiny waterfall. He blinked as he took in her form, never truly believing just how beautiful she was until he got to see it again. Quickly, she repeated the process with his shirt. Only she stopped halfway through, leaving Naruto with his arms stuck up and in the shirt covering his face. Taya gently stroked a hand up his exposed stomach, tracing the visible edges of the abs before she planted a small wet kiss just above his navel. Finally, he pulled the shirt the rest of the way off, looking at his girlfriend questioningly as she merely shrugged as a reply. Oh, took and play at that game, Taya-chan. She only had a millisecond to look curious before she found her arms pinned behind her back. Looking around, she saw the smiling face of another half-naked Naruto, pinning her arms behind her as the original smirked. Quickly, he began to very lightly run his hands up and down her toned stomach, feather-like touches that got Taya biting her lip to stop herself laughing or moaning at each pleasurable caress. She jerked up as Naruto planted one, then multiple kisses across her stomach before licking a small trail up to her breast. He took one look at the bindings that separated him from Taya's chest before unraveling them in one smooth motion. His prize bounced for a moment as Taya's endowments were freed, and nearly making her gasp as the slight cold air in the room assaulted her now exposed nipples. Naruto only had time for a brief smirk before he attacked them, licking, sucking, and generally doing all he could to bring Taya's pleasure with just his mouth and hands. Soon Taya was quivering mess on the bed, unable to gather the strength to even try and struggle against the clone holding her. By now, Naruto knew her better than anyone else could or ever would, knowing the exact spots that sent her over the edge. As he let his hands continue the work, his mouth started. He began to slowly kiss up her chest, making her torso shine from all the wet kisses. As he passed her collarbone, he gently nibbled on it, making the redhead shudder with pleasure before he did the same thing to the side of her neck, only to end up at her mouth. Starved of his lips for too long, she hungrily attacked them, letting her tongue roam around as she moaned into the contact. Of course, all good things come to an end, and their end just happened to be a knock at the door of their apartment. Naruto broke away from Taya, leaving her lips puckered and her eyes closed expectantly, even as a scowl of sheer annoyance crossed over her features. Naruto stood up and left her with an apologetic look before he shrugged on his coat and walked to the door. Taya just sat with her arms over her chest, staring angrily at where she knew the door was, like she could see through the walls. I'll kill them, I swear, Tukami! Naruto chuckled as he opened it, surprised to see Gurren on the other side, smiling warmly. Hey Naruto, Fu came over to visit us, so I just wanted to stop by and say hi. Naruto nearly broke out laughing, confusing Gurren as he stifled a snort. Suddenly he caught himself and stood up straighter, smiling goofily at Gurren, amazed at her terrible timing. To whoever the fuck it is, we're busy! Naruto turned to Yu's voice echoing from the bedroom as she called out in irritation. What would evil Scar with a mission? He tried to make it sound innocent, but it came out with too many stifled chuckles. Then tell him to fuck off! Naruto grinned as she shook his head and turned back to Gurren. The blue-haired woman was now blushing as she took in Naruto's half-dressed appearance, and Tayu's voice coming from the bedroom, tweaking to what was going on. Oh, sorry Naruto, I should leave you two alone. Naruto nodded with a kind smile. Come back in about an hour, then we can catch up. Maybe I'll go out and get something to eat. Gurren nodded, now rather anxious to leave the couple to get back to what she had interrupted. He shouted, get the fuck back in here and finish what you started. Naruto's goofy grin turned a bit more mischievous as he glanced back at Gurren one more time. Make that 2 hours. And with that, he disappeared around the door of his bedroom, leaving a startled Gurren who quickly closed the door before she heard anything she didn't want to. So we have guests, and you get more naked. Taya just beamed happily on the bed while he had been talking. She had managed to get out of her pants and sandals, leaving her in nothing but a pair of bright pink panties laid out on the bed in a seductive pose. Hey, this is our alone time. Everyone else can just fuck off for all I care. Naruto just grinned as he jumped on the bed beside her, kissing her softly on her lips. It was Gurren. Taya kissed him back. Don't care. Naruto smirked as he deepened the kiss. She wanted to come around and say hi. Taya grinned even more as she too deepened the kiss. Still don't care. Naruto smiled cheekily, knowing he was getting under her skin. Maybe we should have let her in and catch up. Taya finally broke away, sitting up as she crossed her arms under her chest and stared at him blankly. What are you, gay? Naruto just chuckled as he too sat up, admiring her body. Definitely not. Taya just sighed as he pulled her into a warm hug before melting into the embrace. Suddenly, a thought occurred to Naruto as he remembered something that he had promised he would do. He broke away from the hug, leaving Taya to pout cutely at loosening his body heat. Hey, how about we go on a date? Taya stopped pouting long enough to stare at him in confusion, waiting for him to clarify. You know, me, you, out doing something romantic. Taya couldn't help the smirk that overcame her features. What suddenly brought this out, shithead? Naruto just shrugged as he smiled sheepishly. You know, between the way we sort of fell into all of this and the sudden separation, we would never really did all those things that a normal couple do. Taya just looked amused as she shuffled closer to Naruto, latching onto his arm. We aren't exactly a normal couple, shithead. He looked a little crestfallen as he glanced away. All right. Taya just slapped him playfully on the stomach. I didn't say no. Naruto looked around, any hint of sadness gone, as it was replaced by a beaming grin. Before Taya could enjoy it properly, he was assaulting her lips, now very intent on showing just how much he loved her. Naruto couldn't even believe he was actually nervous. He had faced down people that by all rights should have left him dead, and he was scared about the date. It made absolutely no sense in his head. He knew that Taya loved him. He knew he loved her. It wasn't like they were a new couple just starting out. Ever so he could feel the butterflies in his stomach fluttering about. The teasing from Kurama didn't really help all that much either. He had taken to pacing to try and ease his nerves. Doing something usually helped. In this case, not so much. You ready to go? All thoughts of nervousness disappeared when he glanced across to where Taya had emerged from the bedroom. If his jaw wasn't attached to his head, it might have dropped off in surprise. He knew the redhead was beautiful, but this was just ridiculous. Oh, wow. Tayu smirked, twirling on the spot to show off her outfit. I know, fucking smoking hot, right? Naruto could only nod dumbly to caught up in what she was wearing. It was a short, plain black dress with the strap going over one shoulder, letting the neckline slant off to one side, showing decent cleavage. It stopped at about the middle of her thighs, showing off her perfectly smooth legs that just seemed to keep going forever, at least until they met her feet, covered by equally black heeled sandals, like what Tsunade wore, but slightly higher. To top it off, she had her hair pulled into a loose ponytail. She had never seen it in anything other than he had never seen it in anything other than a loose sheet that fell down her back. And this revealed her creamy neck and shoulders where her spiral mark could be spotted, looking like nothing more than an ordinary tattoo. She wore a loose bangle on her wrist, probably a gift from Temari, or something she borrowed from the older girl, as he had never seen her wear it before. You look incredible. Tayu had to suppress a small blush from breaking out over her face. I know, you clean up pretty well too, shithead. Naruto looked down at himself. He was just wearing his normal black shinobi pants with a different, lighter orange t-shirt and a black jacket slung over the top. His head was still a shaggy mess, but he had at least tried to straighten out his spikes. However, unsuccessfully. In comparison to Tayu, he felt completely underdressed. But if she didn't mind, he was willing to shrug it off. So, are we heading out to dinner at some restaurant or something? Naruto smiled devilishly as a response. Please. With that, he grabbed her shoulder, and after a moment of tingling, both vanished from the room. Tayu nearly shrieked out in surprise when they materialized, and she looked down, only to see Sunagakure hundreds of meters below them. Her eyes opened wide as she tentatively prodded her foot against the little cloud they were standing on. She held onto Naruto tightly, thinking that at any moment the two of them would go plunging down through the cloud and into the ground below. Naruto noticed her looking down in fear and clasped her shoulder tightly before bending down. When he came back up, she watched as sand trickled through his fingers, making her eyes widen. Don't worry, Gara said he could give us about an hour up here. Tayu was still a little dumbfounded, not truly believing that Naruto had sent them up into the sky, only supported by a sheet of sand. But what if he can't hold it? Naruto just chuckled and pulled an arm around her shoulder. Please, I bet Gara could hold this thing in his sleep. He was just sore. He didn't think of the idea first. Tayu was still a little confused, not understanding why Naruto had brought her up here. Of course, the view was breathtaking, and she had to admit that standing on a cloud was romantic, but in reality, it was scary as hell. What idea? Naruto just smiled warmly as he motioned behind her with his hand. She turned to see a small table, large enough for two, with a single candle in the middle. Two chairs were set up in front of the two meals on clean white plates. Tayu just had to gawk at this, in disbelief at what Naruto was doing. How did you set all this up in just a few hours? Naruto shrugged nonchalantly. I think well on my feet. Plus I figured our first real date should be special. Tayu could only nod dumbly as they walked over to the table. Naruto pulling out her chair for her in a very gentlemanly fashion. Well, A+ for effort. Naruto chuckled softly as he sat down opposite her, looking across at her as he once again took in how beautiful she looked. Tayu was still so shocked that she barely noticed the food in front of her, and instead she kept looking around them at the sky, the distant ground, and the sun, which would be setting in about half an hour. And this is all just incredible. Naruto could only smile. He could only smile. His view was firmly fixed on the woman in front of him. Yeah, it is. She looked around with a smirk, noting where Naruto's eyes were, and the slightly vacant tone in his voice before he managed to catch himself and stop staring. Finally, Tayu looked down and taking in the plate of sashimi in front of her. It made sense to having something that couldn't go cold when they were this high up. Luckily, she wasn't feeling the chill. It was at that perfect time in the desert when it wasn't too hot like midday, but not too cold like at night. The two happily ate their meal, talked and laughed as they made jokes or remembered something from their past. In all, they acted like most other couples do on the first date, except without the awkwardness that came with a new relationship or not knowing your date very well. Except, of course, they were having their date on top of a cloud. Not many people could ever have claimed that happened to them, and Tayu couldn't feel more special. She was really astounded to the lengths Naruto went to try and make their date special. Of course, he topped it all off with a plate of steaming dango that he seemingly produced out of thin air. Although she figured it had something to do with the Fuki no Iki, she beamed like a schoolgirl, reaching out for the plate of dango hungrily, as Naruto just chuckled, handing it over and watching her slowly make her way through the entire plate. He found it adorable how much she enjoyed the food, even if it meant he couldn't have any. Luckily, he sealed some away in a scroll for himself later. Dango was still tasty after all. This was all incredible, Naruto. He just nodded with a smile as he motioned for her to come over to him. She did so, and he sat her down on his lap. She rested her head against his chest, leaning into the crook of his neck as he slowly kissed her on top of her head. He turned them both so they were both staring out at the horizon. It's not quite over yet. As soon as he said it, the sun began to sink past the horizon slowly, sending the sky that was still lit into a variety of colors as even the cloud they were sitting on erupted into various shades of pink or orange. Toya gasped at the beautiful sight, never thinking she would witness a sunset with the man she loved on top of a cloud. It was the kind of thing young, naive Kunoichi dream about while they are still fresh into the academy. Of course, she was never that naive, but it didn't stop her from appreciating the moment. Of course, it had to eventually end soon. The last silver of the sun dropped behind the flat horizon of the desert, plunging the city into the darkness of the night. Of course, that only meant the two of them were left looking up at the crescent moon, which now shone brightly. Honestly, she didn't believe that this night could get any more perfect, although she had an idea of how to make it so. She nudged Naruto, who pulled his head out of her hair long enough to look at her. Thank you, Naruto. We should probably head back to the house now. It's starting to get a little cold. Naruto nodded with a smile before the two of them vanished from the cloud, reappearing not a moment later back into the room. And they both plopped onto the bed, with Naruto staring expectantly at Toya while she just stared at the wall, apparently in thought. So what did you? He suddenly found a finger over his mouth, preventing him from saying any more as Toya turned to him. Naruto, I think we're ready. He blinked a few times questioningly. Ready for what? Toya could only laugh. She might never have been naive, but Naruto was still that clueless idiot that she had fallen for 2 years ago. Naruto, I said we're ready. Naruto stared at her blankly before realization dawned on his face. Are you sure? I mean, once again, a finger was pressed to his lips as Toya shushed him. Shut up, shithead, and for once, just let it happen. He could only nod before Toya stood up from the bed, slowly and sensually pulling her dress off of over her head, leaving her for the second time that day in just her panties. Naruto blinked again as she slipped off the high-heeled sandals before removing her bangles and letting her hair fall from the ponytail. He couldn't say anything before she slipped onto the bed, drawing his shirt over his head, not even bothering to tease him this time. Naruto almost robotically removed his trousers, taking off his sandals at the same time before rejoining Toya on the bed. They were both a little nervous and just started off with something they both were comfortable with. Naruto kissed her gently on the mouth before she allowed his tongue to enter, and the both of them swirling their appendages around one another in an almost dance-like movement. Naruto stayed on top mostly, but they would roll around on the bed, enjoying the kiss as they grew more and more comfortable with one another. Naruto parted only to immediately litter Toya's body with kisses, almost not leaving a single patch dry. Toya could only writhe as she felt his soft lips all over her body before, and in reply of her first real night of intimacy, he began to draw down her panties with his teeth. Once again, he kissed trail up her legs before slowly circling her core. Not wanting to be teased this time around, she took action, grabbing the back of his head and gently guiding it towards where she was desperately wanted him to be. He smiled and just followed her wishes, gently licking up the length of her slit before darting his tongue in with one quick motion. Toya gasped out in surprise and pleasure, unconsciously pushing Naruto a bit harder into the core. He was more than happy to oblige as he fiercely began to lick her out, swallowing his tongue in increasingly complicated ways as he did everything he could imagine to bring her to the brink. Finally, when she was panting for breath and by biting her lip to stave off the moans he withdrew, only to firmly clasp his lips down over her special nub, sucking it once. Toya cried out in pleasure and desire as she released, moaning as Naruto licked up everything she had to offer, and prolonging her orgasm as long as he could. Finally, she came down from her high, and Naruto would have dived right in again if she hadn't gotten his head away from her special area and back up to hers. She softly planted a kiss on his cheek before reversing the position and sliding down his body. Naruto smiled lightly as she repeated his sexy gesture, pulling off his boxers with her teeth and grinning at the sight of his erected member. Happy to see me? Naruto just chuckled as he nodded. Always. Naruto nodded happily before immediately enveloping him as much as she could of him into her mouth. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise, but they quickly became heavy and lighted as she began to bob up and down. What really pushed him over the edge was when she looked up at him, her large green eyes staring straight into his. It was quite possibly the sexiest thing he had ever seen, and would have lost it right there if he hadn't started pacing herself. However, he was a man and could only last so long before his hands began gripping the sheets of the bed tightly. Taya, I'm going to. He literally couldn't make out anymore before he released. Taya drank it all down once again, and noting the strange but not unpleasant taste. With a small smirk, finally she rejoined him higher up on the bed, but both of them still panting from the other's administrations. Naruto kissed her lightly on the lips, which quickly developed into a more ferocious makeout session, a sort of thanks from one to the other before they parted again, each tasting themselves in the other's mouth and not finding it entirely bad. Naruto, please. The blonde smiled softly and nodded before he readjusted his body, lining himself up. Taya could only moan as she felt his length gently pressed up against her lips before slowly slid in. Her hands found his shoulders, nails biting into his skin as she winced from the feeling of being slowly filled up in the most unbelievable way. Likewise, Naruto had his eyes screwed shut. Taya was so tight that the feeling was truly indescribable. He had learned about the female body from Hana, so was surprised when he continued to feel no resistance. Taya seemed to notice his slight hesitation. He broke in training, and she managed to say it between gasps before Naruto nodded, continuing up. Finally, after a few minutes, he was fully inside of her. His lips pressed up against hers, unable to go in any further because of the resistance his tip met deep inside of her. He was amazed that he seemed to feel her completely, like they were made for one another. The sheath perfectly matches the sword, as it were. They lay there for who knows how long as they slowly adjusted to the strange sensation. Really, it was Taya who was adjusting. Naruto had to literally fight off the urge to draw back and repeat the process, but he was hesitant to do so. Finally, Taya let out a deep breath as she had been holding and nodded her head slowly, opening her eyes again to look deep into his, answering his unspoken question. Slowly, he began to withdraw until he was halfway out. Then he equally slowly slid back in. With each movement, Taya would hiss as if in pain, and Naruto stopped worrying about his liver. No, please don't stop. Naruto just nodded, pulling back out a little faster to the gasp of Taya. Quickly he moved back in, earned another gasp followed by a soft moan. He gradually sped up, moving at a pace that would be comfortable to Taya, so that he didn't hurt her while she still winced ever so often. Just so unused to this, her moans were growing louder and sounding less painful to the point where it was a pure pleasure. A thin sheen of sweat coated both of their bodies as Naruto continued to thrust in and out of Taya, experimenting with different angles to see which got the best results. Finally, he seemed to strike something within her, and all at once, she cried out, unable to hold back her screams as she released. Naruto's eyes widened as her passions clamped down around him, squeezing him for everything he had, and he too couldn't hold back any longer. However, he knew about the pregnancy and had just a sound enough mind to withdraw before he released all over Taya's stomach. Taya could only pant as her mind was lost to the pleasure, blinking rapidly without really seeing anything. Naruto was likewise spent, not really energy wise, but just breathless. He fell down to the bed beside Taya, wrapping an arm under her body and drawing her close. He waited for her to recover as he held her naked bodies together, her head resting on his chest, while he buried his face into her hair, both basking in the afterglow of their lovemaking, both content and happy. Kami-sama, she said it breathlessly, and Naruto just nodded, not even bothering to laugh. My sentiments exactly. Taya, apparently having recovered, twisted in his arms, looking up at him with big, doughy eyes. Round 2, end of chapter 58.